Most people believe poverty is caused by bad luck, low income, or unfair systems. But what if the real danger is not what you earn? It's what you don't understand. As 2026 approaches, global systems are quietly shifting, debt is exploding, currencies are weakening, and the rules that once protected ordinary people are breaking down. Those who don't recognize these changes will feel poorer even if they work harder than ever. And those who prepare will quietly move ahead while everyone else wonders what went wrong. Most people believe the world is divided into two simple groups, the rich and the poor. This belief feels logical because money is visible, measurable, and easy to compare. But this division hides a deeper truth. The real gap in modern economies is not created by income levels, but by awareness. There is a growing divide between those who understand how systems work and those who move through life without recognizing the forces shaping their outcomes. Economic systems do not reward effort equally. They reward positioning, timing, and understanding. Two people can work equally hard, even within the same job or industry, yet experience completely different financial outcomes over time. This difference rarely comes from talent alone. It comes from knowing how inflation, debt, interest rates, and asset ownership quietly influence purchasing power and opportunity. Those who are unprepared often believe stability is permanent. They assume jobs will exist tomorrow because they existed yesterday. They assume prices will rise slowly, savings will hold value, and governments will protect them during downturns. This mindset creates vulnerability because it relies on continuity in a world built on cycles. When conditions change, the unprepared are forced to react instead of adjust. Education in this context has little to do with formal schooling. Degrees and certifications may improve income potential, but they do not guarantee resilience. Financial awareness is about understanding cause and effect. It is knowing that when money supply expands faster than productivity, purchasing power declines. It is recognizing that debt-funded growth always carries long-term consequences. Without this understanding, people misinterpret symptoms as problems, never seeing the underlying structure. Unprepared individuals often blame external forces when pressure increases. They blame markets, employers, technology, or politics. While these factors matter, they are part of larger cycles that repeat across generations. Those who study these patterns expect volatility and plan for it. Those who don't are shocked every time it arrives, even though history shows it always does. Another critical difference is how each group views risk. The unprepared try to avoid risk entirely, clinging to what feels safe. They prefer fixed income, predictable routines, and familiar systems. Ironically, this avoidance often exposes them to the greatest danger because inflation and systemic shifts erode fixed positions over time. The educated understand that not all risk is equal and that avoiding informed risk can be more damaging than taking it. Prepared individuals build buffers. They diversify income streams, acquire adaptable skills, and avoid overdependence on a single institution. They don't assume protection. They create it. This doesn't mean they are fearless or reckless. It means they recognize uncertainty as a permanent condition rather than a temporary problem. The unprepared often learn lessons too late. They notice inflation after savings lose value. They recognize job insecurity only after layoffs begin. They seek new skills when industries are already saturated. By the time action feels urgent, options are limited and costly. Preparation, by contrast, happens quietly and early when change still feels optional. This divide explains why economic stress hits certain groups harder than others, even when they appear equally hardworking. It also explains why inequality widens during transitions. Those who understand cycles move ahead before shifts become obvious. Those who don't experience the shift as sudden and unfair. The most dangerous assumption is that awareness is unnecessary. Many believe financial knowledge is only for investors or elites. In reality, understanding systems is a survival skill. The world does not punish people for being poor. It punishes people for being unaware of how value moves, how power concentrates, and how cycles reset. Because systems do not adapt to individuals. Individuals must adapt to systems. Debt is not just a financial tool. It is a system that shapes power, behavior, and long-term outcomes. In every major economy, debt expands quietly during periods of growth and optimism. Borrowing feels manageable when incomes rise and markets remain stable. Over time, however, debt grows faster than productivity, and the balance between what is owed and what can be produced begins to break. This is the moment when debt stops being supportive and starts becoming destructive. Debt cycles follow predictable phases. First comes easy credit, where borrowing is encouraged and risk is underestimated. Then comes dependence, where individuals, businesses, and governments rely on new debt to sustain old obligations. Finally comes the reset, where the system can no longer function as designed. This reset rarely looks like a dramatic collapse at first. It often arrives as slower growth, higher prices, weaker currencies, and increasing pressure on everyday life. When debt resets occur, they do not affect everyone equally. Those with assets, influence, and access to financial tools can adapt. They can refinance, hedge, or move capital into areas that protect value. Those without these advantages absorb the shock directly. The poor experience the reset through rising costs, shrinking wages in real terms, and reduced access to opportunity. Governments play a central role in this process. When debt becomes too large to repay through growth alone, authorities face limited choices. They can raise taxes, cut spending, default, or reduce the value of the currency. Historically, reducing currency value is the most politically acceptable option. It spreads pain slowly and quietly without requiring immediate confrontation. Inflation becomes the hidden mechanism that transfers burden from debtors to the public. For low-income populations, inflation acts like a tax that cannot be avoided. Food, housing, energy, and transportation consume a larger portion of their income. When prices rise, they have no buffer. Savings, if they exist, lose value. Wages lag behind costs. The result is not just financial stress, but a gradual loss of dignity and control over life choices. The tragedy is that debt resets are often misunderstood. People blame corporations, landlords, or retailers for higher prices, without realizing these are symptoms of a deeper imbalance. The real cause lies in years of accumulated borrowing and delayed consequences. By the time the reset becomes visible, the conditions that caused it are already deeply embedded in the system. Another overlooked aspect is how debt reshapes behavior. As pressure increases, people borrow more to maintain their lifestyle. Credit cards, personal loans, and informal debt become survival tools. This deepens dependency and reduces future flexibility. What begins as relief becomes a trap, locking individuals into obligations that grow harder to escape as conditions worsen. The wealthy are not immune to debt cycles, but they experience them differently. They often benefit during resets by acquiring distressed assets, restructuring obligations, and leveraging volatility. While the poor struggle to pay higher prices, those with capital position themselves for the next expansion. This is not a moral judgment. It is a structural reality built into the system. Education about debt is rarely taught where it is most needed. Many people understand monthly payments, but not long-term consequences. They see borrowing as a solution rather than a trade-off. Without understanding cycles, individuals mistake temporary relief for stability and fail to recognize when conditions are shifting against them. As debt cycles reset, the system does not announce it clearly. There is no official signal, no public warning. The reset unfolds through small changes that accumulate over time. Those who recognize the pattern early can protect themselves by reducing exposure, increasing adaptability, and questioning assumptions about stability. Those who don't are forced to adjust only after the cost becomes unbearable. For generations, people were taught that hard work was the ultimate solution to financial struggle. Show up early, stay late, and loyalty would be rewarded with stability and progress. That belief was not entirely false in earlier economic environments, but it no longer reflects how modern systems function. Today, effort alone does not protect people from instability, and in many cases, it is the least effective tool during periods of economic transition. Cash has long been considered safety, especially for those who fear risk. Holding money feels responsible and disciplined, but cash is not a static asset. Its value depends on the systems surrounding it. When currencies weaken due to inflation or excessive money creation, cash quietly loses purchasing power. What once felt like protection becomes exposure. Those who rely solely on cash without understanding its limitations often discover too late that their savings buy less every year. At the same time, skills have become the true form of currency. Not all skills are equal. Repetitive, easily replaceable tasks are the most vulnerable during economic stress and technological shifts. Adaptable skills that solve complex problems, generate value across industries, or scale through systems become increasingly valuable. The difference between stability and struggle often lies in whether a person's skills can move with the economy or are trapped in a declining structure. Awareness connects cash and skills into a strategy. Without awareness, people save in ways that don't protect them and work in roles that don't grow with time. Awareness means understanding where demand is moving, how technology is reshaping labor, and why certain industries shrink while others expand. It means recognizing that effort in the wrong direction can produce exhaustion without progress. Hard work without awareness often leads to burnout. People take on more hours, more responsibilities, and more stress, believing intensity will compensate for structural change. Instead, they become more dependent on systems that are already weakening. When layoffs, automation, or cost pressures arrive, their extra effort offers no protection because the problem was never effort. It was positioning. Those who combine cash with strategy use money as a tool, not a shelter. They keep liquidity for flexibility, not permanence. They understand when to hold, when to convert, and when to deploy resources. This approach allows them to respond to change instead of being crushed by it. The goal is not to avoid uncertainty, but to remain mobile within it. Skill development follows the same principle. Prepared individuals invest time in learning that compounds. They focus on skills that increase leverage, such as communication, analysis, digital systems, and decision-making. These skills create optionality, allowing movement across roles, industries, and income models. Hard work becomes powerful only when applied through skills that multiply its impact. Awareness also changes how people interpret signals. Rising prices, job instability, and policy shifts are not random events. They are indicators of deeper transitions. Those who notice these signs early adjust spending, learning, and career paths accordingly. Those who ignore them continue as normal until pressure forces abrupt change. The economy does not reward suffering. It rewards usefulness, adaptability, and timing. People who believe struggle itself creates value often stay stuck, while those who work intelligently conserve energy and grow influence. Hard work is still required, but it must be directed, informed, and flexible to remain effective. In the coming environment, survival and progress will belong to those who understand that effort is only one input. Cash must be managed with awareness, skills must evolve with demand, and understanding must guide action, because working harder in a shrinking system does not create security, it accelerates exhaustion. When economic pressure rises, governments are expected to intervene. People look to authorities for stability, protection, and solutions. Throughout history, the most common response to widespread financial stress has been monetary expansion. Relief programs, stimulus packages, subsidies, and support payments are presented as lifelines, designed to ease hardship and restore confidence. On the surface, these measures appear compassionate and necessary. Printing money feels like a painless solution because it avoids immediate sacrifice. Taxes do not rise sharply, spending cuts are delayed, and political backlash is minimized. New money enters the system quietly, supporting markets and households in the short term. For a brief period, conditions seem to improve. Spending resumes, asset prices stabilize, and fear recedes. The cost of this relief, however, is rarely discussed openly. When money supply expands faster than the production of goods and services, value is diluted. Each unit of currency represents a smaller share of real output. This dilution does not happen overnight, and that is what makes it dangerous. Inflation creeps in gradually, disguising itself as normal price increases rather than a systemic shift. Inflation affects people unevenly. Those with assets that rise in nominal value can absorb or even benefit from it. Those who depend on wages and fixed incomes feel the impact directly. Essentials like food, housing, healthcare, and transportation become more expensive, while income struggles to keep pace. Relief that once felt supportive begins to feel insufficient, then meaningless. For lower-income households, inflation functions like a silent clawback. Assistance arrives in the form of payments or subsidies, but rising prices slowly reclaim that support. Over time, people find themselves working just as hard or harder for the same standard of living. The psychological damage is significant. Trust in systems erodes, and frustration grows as promises fail to translate into lasting stability. Another hidden effect of monetary expansion is asset inflation. When excess liquidity flows into markets, asset prices rise. Real estate stocks and other investments become more expensive, pushing ownership further out of reach for those without capital. The gap between those who own assets and those who don't widens, not because of effort, but because of access. Governments often justify money printing as temporary, a bridge to recovery. In reality, once expansion begins, reversing it becomes politically and economically difficult. Withdrawing liquidity risks slowing growth, increasing unemployment, and triggering market corrections. As a result, expansion tends to continue, reinforcing inflationary pressures over time. Many people misunderstand inflation as greed or mismanagement at the retail level. They blame businesses for raising prices, unaware that higher costs are being passed through the system. Energy, logistics, labor, and financing all become more expensive in an inflated environment. Businesses respond to survive, not to exploit, while consumers bear the outcome. The illusion of relief is powerful because it creates dependency. People begin to expect support during every downturn, adjusting behavior around future intervention. This expectation encourages risk-taking at the top and complacency at the bottom. Over time, the system becomes more fragile, requiring larger and more frequent interventions to maintain stability. Understanding this dynamic is critical. Relief is not free, and inflation is not accidental. It is a mechanism that redistributes burden across society. often hitting those with the least protection the hardest. Those who recognize this pattern early adjust their strategies, seeking ways to protect purchasing power rather than relying on promises. Inflation does not announce itself as theft. It presents itself as normal change, small increases, temporary disruptions. But over time, it reshapes lifestyles, erodes savings, and narrows opportunity, quietly taking back what relief once appeared to give. Most people wait for a crisis to announce itself clearly. They expect dramatic headlines, sudden collapses, and unmistakable signals that something is wrong. But the most important economic shifts rarely arrive this way. They unfold gradually through policy changes, market adjustments, and behavioral shifts that feel manageable at first. By the time the situation is labeled a crisis, the real damage has already been done. The environment leading into 2026 reflects this pattern. Instead of a single breaking point, there is a layering of pressures. Debt levels remain elevated, purchasing power continues to erode, and uncertainty becomes a constant background presence. These conditions do not destroy systems overnight. They test them, revealing weaknesses that were previously hidden by growth and stability. Financial intelligence becomes the defining factor in such an environment. This does not mean predicting the future with precision. It means understanding probabilities, recognizing patterns, and responding rationally instead of emotionally. People with financial intelligence adjust before stress becomes unbearable. They change habits, reduce exposure, and build flexibility while options still exist. Those without this awareness often misinterpret what is happening. They believe the problem is temporary and wait for a return to normal. They delay decisions, hoping conditions will improve on their own. This waiting is costly because systems in transition do not reverse easily. What feels like patience can become paralysis. A key aspect of financial intelligence is distinguishing noise from signal. Markets fluctuate daily, news cycles amplify fear, and opinions change constantly. Intelligent responses are not driven by headlines but by structure. Understanding how debt, liquidity, demographics, and productivity interact provides clarity when surface-level information becomes overwhelming. Another test comes through personal behavior. Inflation pressures spending habits, debt encourages short-term thinking, and uncertainty triggers fear-based decisions. Financial intelligence resists these impulses. It focuses on sustainability rather than comfort, preparation rather than reaction. People who pass this test make choices that preserve long-term stability even when short-term relief is tempting. The period ahead will also test adaptability. Careers, industries, and income models are evolving faster than many expect. Financial intelligence recognizes that identity tied to a single role or employer creates fragility. Those who remain flexible, continuously learning and adjusting, reduce their dependence on any single outcome. Social comparison becomes more dangerous during such transitions. Watching others appear successful can push people into risky decisions. Financial intelligence ignores appearances and focuses on fundamentals. It values resilience over speed and consistency over hype. This mindset protects individuals from chasing trends that collapse under pressure. Another challenge lies in trust. Institutions that once provided certainty now struggle with credibility. Financial intelligence does not assume protection or betrayal. It assumes uncertainty and prepares accordingly. This balanced view avoids both blind faith and extreme cynicism, allowing for clear decision-making. 2026 will reward those who understand that stability is no longer passive. It must be actively maintained through awareness, discipline, and adaptation. The test is not about wealth accumulation alone, but about preserving control over choices in a shifting environment. Those who treat this period as a temporary storm will exhaust themselves waiting for calm. Those who recognize it as an evaluation of understanding will adjust their thinking, behavior, and expectations. The difference will not be visible immediately, but over time, it will separate those who feel trapped from those who remain in control.